bearing replacement is probably the most common item that we're going to do as far as actually repairing the fan. What we want to do when we check bearings is, first of all, take the belt off. You can't check the bearings with the belt on. We want to move the shaft back and forth and check for movement. It's very common for the shaft to spin inside the race. We want to look and see if that shaft is wiggling inside the race. Here I'm holding the race with my hand and spinning the shaft, and we can see that the shaft is actually spinning inside the race. That tells me that this shaft is worn inside that race. So when we pull these bearings off, we will actually see a groove inside this shaft. Here is an example of what a worn shaft looks like. Therefore, it's important that we relocate the bearing into a good meet on the shaft, or slide the shaft up and down in the bearing. That looks like it was put in a metal lathe and cut a big groove in the shaft. When we put the new bearings on, we're going to have a problem because they're going to want to position themselves right where that groove is. So now what we have to do is determine what we're going to do to remedy that situation. Alright, we have to see that the shaft is thoroughly cleaned using an emery cloth. We also need to check the shaft for any bungs on top of the shaft so that we can get that pulley off the top of the shaft. Here I'm getting emery cloth ready to clean the shaft off so I can get the bearings off. Notice the rust and corrosion. You have to get all this rust and corrosion off and get the shaft down to bare metal. Watch for dings and burrs, as these will prevent that bearing from sliding off, and it will also prevent the new bearing from going on. A file is the very best tool for getting rid of the dings. It's important to mention at this time, in this scenario, the shaft is where the real problem is, but we're going to replace the bearings also, because often the bearings can be getting tight and they aren't rolling around as well as they should, and they're putting resistance, causing that shaft to spin inside the bearing. Here we're cleaning the shaft for a final preparation to pull the bearing. I'm checking the bearing out to see what exactly it's going to take to get this thing off. Now in this case we have a locking concentric collar on here. This is a collar that is offset from the race on the bearing. What you do in these is loosen up the set screws and then tap the top concentric lock, and it loosens up everything so the bearing and the lock can come off. Notice I've sprayed WD on here. You can use PB Blast or any kind of lubricant so we can knock off the bearings. Alright, here the bearings are coming off, and we'll have them all off here in a second. Alright, I did mention that we have a groove in the shaft where it's spun inside the bearing. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to drill new locating holes for the bearing just a little bit above the original holes, so that when the new bearing goes on, it's not going to be positioned right where that worn out shaft piece is. Alright, we're just about ready here to install the new bearings, and here they go. Again, lots of lubrication so that they go on easy. We'll just tap them on a little bit here to get them started, and they'll go right down on. Alright, notice on the pillow block bearings I got slots. That was a quick shot of it, but they're slots. Those bearings can slide back and forth in their mounting bolts. This allows the shaft to go right and left. If I want the shaft to go forward and backwards, I will place washers between the bearing and the plate. This will move it back and forth. That way there's no need to go underneath that fan drum and go bending things up so things don't hit. I can literally move that fan drum back and forth and sideways by the adjustments. I can also loosen up the set screws on the locking collars and pull the shaft up and down. Now right now I'm going to determine exactly where I want this shaft to be positioned. I'm going to tighten up the locking collars on these races on the bearings. This will hold that shaft up from going up and down. I'm going to want to check this wheel to see that it'll spin properly and not be hitting anything. Alright, so after this is all secured up, we'll be giving it a spin and see what's going to happen. Once I'm comfortable with my up and down location on the fan wheel, I'm going to position my bearings and start tightening them up. Here I'm checking the clearance between the base of the motor and the actual top of the fan. It's important that I see how much I can raise the wheel up, because this wheel is bottomed out against the actual bottom of the fan. I need this wheel to be as close to that bottom as possible without actually hitting, so that we have a tight seal there. We want it to be pulling air from down in the ducts, not from around the fan. So we're going to reposition this thing. Now this fan will run 100%.